Alright, so in this week's lesson, we're going to talk about mixing the notes of the major and the minor pentatonic scales together to create a standalone composition, which is a fun little blues thing that you can play by yourself. You don't need a jam track or any of that. You can just grab any guitar and you can play with or without a pick. Now, I chose to play fingerstyle without a pick. You can do it either way. But this is really useful when it comes to improvising, whether you're playing a standalone composition like this or you're playing along with a band or a jam track. You need to know how to take the notes of the major pentatonic scale and minor pentatonic scale and kind of work them together. And so this lesson is really to give you ideas for some licks and some ways to kind of think about doing that. Now, we talked about that in last week's lesson, which was EP436. It was a deep dive on the pentatonic scales and how they connect to the cage system. So if you haven't checked that out, you might want to start with that one. That's EP436, and go to the Active Melody website and do a search for that. But in this week's lesson, we have it split into two parts. So we're going to go through the first half of what I played in the intro, note for note. However, if you'd like to learn the entire composition as well as download the tablature for this and also access the interactive tab viewer, you can get those things by going to activemelody.com, go to the weekly lessons page, and do a search for EP437. Okay, so this song that we're going to be playing is in the key of C, and I chose the key of C, and actually we're going to be playing it up here in the middle of the neck for the reason that we don't have any open strings. So there's no open strings in this. That means you can transpose this and play this in any key. Everything you're about to learn here can apply to any key. And so I would encourage you to learn this first in the key of C, but then try playing it in another key just to kind of prove to yourself that you're not just memorizing frets, but you're really able to see these shapes and how they connect to each other. So if we think of the key of C and we think of it in this position, that's where I'm playing using the E chord shape. Now, we're not going to be playing this chord, but I want you to start by picturing this chord shape. I'm barring up here on the 8th fret, and then these three fingers are making up the E shape out of caged. If that's my 1 chord, then my 5 chord, which would be a G, by the way, the notes, the chords in this will be C, F, and G. That's your 1, 4, and 5. So if that's my C chord, my 5 chord is right there in the same neighborhood. In fact, if I'm making the C chord like this, I can keep my ring finger down, reposition the other fingers to play a G7 chord. And that's how I'm starting this. I'm starting this with the 5 chord. It's a classic way to start a blues song because the 5 chord is your turnaround anyway. It turns you around and gets you back to the 1 chord. It's your dominant chord. So I'm starting with the 5 chord and then we go into the 1 chord. So anyway, I just wanted to show you that little relationship here between your 1 chord and your 5 chord and how they're all connected. And then your 4 chord is the same as your 5 chord. You just slide it down 2 frets. But it all hinges off of that 8th fret. So in my mind, I'm always picturing that 8th fret where I started the bar from the 1 chord as kind of like my root fret. I don't know how else to say it, but it's like home base. And so I always kind of return back to that if I'm playing out of this shape. So the first thing that I played then was like this. It's a slide into that 5 chord. Now I'm playing it just using the bottom 3 strings of the chord. 10th fret, strings 5 and 3, and then 9th fret, 4th string. And I gave it some vibrato like that. I learned that from Robert Craig. He's the master at putting vibrato on a chord. You don't have to do that. You could just slide into it and play the chord like that. Actually, the way that I'm sliding in is I'm picking with my thumb, or I'm using my thumb to pluck on the 5th string, and then I'm playing strings 4 and 3. Now, if you're using a pick, you can just do the same thing, obviously, with a pick. And then watch this. Here's the 1 chord. We go into the T-bone walker chord. I've done lessons on this. Actually, I'll put a lesson up on the screen right now if you want more information on that. I call it the T-bone walker chord because I think of Stormy Monday and all those sort of that kind of T-bone walker sound. He uses this a lot. Let me show you how to play this chord, and then I'll show you how you can incorporate this into your blues. So let's think back to our root fret. Remember the 8th fret? If I picture that fret as an anchor, this is how I connect the T-bone walker chord to that root fret. So the 8th fret, I put my pinky on the 2nd string, and then I put my ring finger on the 4th string, both in that 8th fret. And then I've put my middle finger down on the 7th fret 3rd string, and my index finger down on the 7th fret 5th string. That's how I'm playing the chord. Now that would be technically a minor 7 flat 5 chord. There's different ways we could think about what this chord is called. It could be a half diminished chord. I think of it as a C9 chord, since the C is our 1 chord. It's a C9 chord over E, or C9 chord with an E in the bass. That's just the easiest, the most logical way for me to think about that chord. Somebody might correct me on that, but that's how I think of it anyway. So we start with the 5 chord, the G7, and then we slide into that. So I didn't start in that position. I started everything up a half step, and then I slide it in. And I got that from T-bone walker. And the T-bone thing to do is, once you learn this shape, you can slide it up a half step or down a half step. So you got a lot of flexibility with that chord. It sounds very jazzy, and it's just a really classy way to play the blues. But connect it to your E shape. Connect it to that root fret so that you can get into it anytime you want to play it. Okay, so that's how you play the T-bone walker chord. Now let's do just a quick refresher on what we talked about last week, just to get our boundaries here. So remember, our root fret is the 8th fret. If we play pattern 1 of the minor pentatonic scale, you can see I hit every note in that 8th fret. So hopefully that's helping you connect that minor pentatonic scale to our root fret here. That would be pattern 1 of the minor pentatonic scale. Pattern 2 is up here, right? That's pattern 2 of the minor pentatonic scale. So that means I can take those same 2 things, pattern 1 and pattern 2, and if I shift everything down 3 frets, so the 8th fret now, we go down 1, 2, 3, down to the 5th fret, and I play the exact same thing, I'm now playing the major pentatonic scale for C. So this would be C minor pentatonic scale, pattern 1 and 2. And this would be C major pentatonic scale, pattern 1, and that means pattern 2. Right? So look at where pattern 2 of the C major pentatonic scale is. There's my root fret, right? C1 of the minor pentatonic scale is right there. So the 2 are in the same neighborhood. So all of a sudden we have all these possibilities now for what we can do. So when I played, that's starting in the major pentatonic scale, pattern 2. You can hear how happy that sounds. It doesn't sound sad at all. In fact, it sounds very country. But then it goes into the sadder sound, or the bluesy sound, of the minor pentatonic scale. So I'm borrowing the first 2 strings on the 8th fret, and I'm doing a hammer-on to the 10th fret 2nd string. Then we go back to that, and then I come down to the 9th fret 3rd string. I'm sorry, the 10th fret 3rd string, 8th fret 2nd string, 8th fret 3rd string, push it sharp just a little bit, and then back to the 10th fret 4th string. Let's do that slowly. That would be the most challenging part, is 8th fret 2nd string, 8th fret 3rd string. Just really controlling that index finger without letting something ring out. You can see now it's got the happy notes of the C major pentatonic scale, pattern 2, mixed with the sad notes of the C minor pentatonic scale, pattern 1. Okay, so from the beginning. Now watch this. Then we go into the 4 chord. Now I'm going to show you this 4 chord. This is we're playing an F. Remember, our 4 chord would be an F in the key of C. This is an F9. And the way that I'm playing that is I'm borrowing the first 3 strings on the 8th fret root fret, right? You can see it's all connected here. And then I've got my index finger on the 7th fret 4th string. That's how I'm playing it. It's really, you could play it like this. The full F9 would be like that, but I'm not using that 5th string. I'm just playing strings 4, 3, 2, and 1. I think that sounds good, but I'm starting down a half step and sliding up. But the thing that I want you to see or be able to visualize is how this connects back to your root. Right? There's your 1 chord, there's your 4 chord. And you can hear it. There's your 1 chord, there's your 4 chord. I just want you to see how they're connected off of that 8th fret. So after I slide into that 4 chord, I came down here and went. Now, before I even explain that, I want you to pause this video and figure out where these notes are coming from. Just try and work it out. I've already covered this, so hopefully that you won't have to stretch too far. But I'll assume you've done that. This would be the major pentatonic scale, pattern 1. So I came down into the Happyville, if you want to think of it that way, the more happy sounding of the two. And I played. See, it sounds pretty happy actually. And over the C chord, if you just heard that, it sounds much happier than the minor pentatonic scale. So that's 7th fret 3rd string. We do a pre-bend release, and then I went. So that's barring the first 4 strings here on the 5th fret, and I'm playing strings 4 and 3, but I'm doing a hammer on to the 7th fret 4th string, and then I went. So this one note is actually not in the major pentatonic scale, but I just kind of threw it in there just as it's really sliding into this note, which would be the 7th fret 5th string. And then after that, I play the 5th fret 3rd string. So I hit those 2 notes and kind of let them ring out together. So all together, that little major pentatonic lick sounds like that. Actually, let them ring together. Now, then the song goes back to the 1 chord, and I played. So let's learn that. So I'm thinking back to my root position, my root fret, home bass, and I'm gonna do a hammer on there. Now I'm technically playing 2 notes out of pattern 2 of the major pentatonic scale, right? So I'm starting with barring the first 3 strings on the 8th fret, and I'm playing strings 2 and 3. And I'm doing a hammer on with my middle finger to the 9th fret 3rd string. But you can also picture that as being your C triad. So either way, and hopefully you connect the 2. Major pentatonic scale pattern 2, then there's the chord triad, the C triad. They're in the same area there. So you have that hammer on, and then we come up and play strings 2 and 3 off of the 10th fret, and then we come up to this position. This would be pattern 2 of the minor pentatonic scale, but we're playing 12th fret 3rd string, 11th fret 2nd string. So hopefully you can see this shape right here, which we started, we did the hammer on, is the same as this shape up here. And this, notice that they're 3 frets apart. This would be your C major, this would be your C minor. This sounds happy. This sounds more sad. Hopefully you can see that. And it's that same 3 fret relationship between whatever you play in the minor pentatonic scale. If you move down 3 frets this way, you're going to be playing the major pentatonic scale. Same is true the opposite. So, oops, we go back here. And then that's how I played it. It was 12, 11, and then we go back to the 10th fret, and then back down to the 8th fret. So, and when I played that 8th fret, I played strings 2 and 3, but I gave it a little bit of a bend there. And then we concluded with that lick, that little phrase. Now that's a Chuck Berry, just strings 1 and 2. out of the 8th fret. That's our root fret. And then we come down to 10, 8, 10 on the 4th fret. Okay, so and then watch this. This is how we get to the 4 chord. I did that same little hammer on, like we've already done, hammering on to the 9th fret 3rd string, 8th fret 2nd string, and then I slid into this. Now this is the same shape as the 5 chord that we started with. Remember we started here? But if I were to take that and go down 2 frets, I'm playing the 4 chord. If this is your 5 chord, this is your 4 chord. That's true of any 5 chord that you're playing, 4 chord, 5 chord relationship. They're 2 frets apart, always. So if I'm playing a 5 chord up here like this, I can take that down 2 frets. There's my 4 chord. And then back to the 1 chord. It's even true with licks. There's a lick over the 5 chord. There's a lick over the 4 chord. So they're always 2 frets apart. Anyway, we're sliding into the 4 chord here. So we have, and we're starting down a half step. That's another reason I like this kind of T-Bone Walker style, is you can take the chords and you can always go down a half step and slide up to where it needs to be. Or you can start up a half step and slide down to where it needs to be. Okay, so back to the 4 chord, which is an F7, by the way. We slide into that. Then I come up here and play this right out of pattern 2 of the major pentatonic scale. So that's sliding up to the 10th fret 2nd string, and then 8th fret 1st string. Then we go back to the 8th fret 1st string, and then 10th fret 2nd string. It's that same little box, but you can see how it has kind of a happier sound because it's coming out of the major pentatonic scale. It has more of a B.B. King kind of. Okay, so we have F7, little B.B. King lick. We go back to the F7, and then I threw in this. This is another thing you gotta know. This is really not a lick, this is more of a chord thing, but I'm playing the F6 and an F9. And so I'm just sliding it. It's very easy to play because it's just using one finger to bar the first 3 strings on the 10th fret and then on the 8th fret. And I want you to picture that as being something that you can do out of this chord shape. I keep coming back to this because it's all connected. So when I think of that root fret, which was where I'm barring on the 8th fret, I'm going to do the slide up to the F6 chord and then come down here to the F9. Remember when we played the F9 like this and we had that little triad there? That's the same thing. So I'm just using it that way. So that's the F9. That means if I go up 2 frets from whatever my 9 chord is, if I do the same thing but go up 2 frets, I'm playing a 6 chord. So that's an F6, that's an F9. Triad. Don't overthink it. Some of you are going to go, well, wait a minute, that's a minor triad. And it is a minor triad, but within a 6 chord is a minor triad, and within a 9 chord is a minor triad. But just the way that you need to think about this is to think of this as representing your 4 chord. So within this little neighborhood that we've been playing in, you've got your 1 chord, I've explained the 5 chord here, you've got your 4 chord using the A shape. It's in the same thing. Look at where that 8th fret is. And if I'm playing it using the A shape, I've got 1 finger on the 8th fret, 1 finger on the 10th fret. And look at this, 10th fret, 8th fret. So that means that if that's an F chord using the A shape, this is an F6, and this is an F9. You can use that anytime you're playing a blues, and it's a nice little slide to go back and forth. And then watch this. So we go out of the happy sound into the more bluesy sound by going right back into minor pentatonic scale pattern 1. So what I'm doing there is 11th fret 2nd string down to the 8th fret 2nd string, and then we come down to the 10th fret 3rd string, do a full bend, and then hit that note up here on the 8th fret 1st string. Where are these notes coming from? Minor pentatonic scale pattern 1. And remember, in that lesson I talked about last week, EP436, I showed you which notes you can bend. So for those of you that are wondering, well, how did you know that you could bend this note? There's a handful of target notes that are always easy to bend and always easy to remember. So you can check that out from that lesson. So we have... So I concluded with a bend and release from the 10th fret 3rd string, and then back to the 8th fret 3rd string. So altogether, that bluesy minor pentatonic scale pattern 1 lick, and then I came down and went back into the T-bone Walker chord, and I just strummed it with my thumb there. If you're using a pick, you can obviously pick strum that. And actually, I'm going to end this lesson there. I think that's a good sort of halfway point, and we've covered a lot of material here. But hopefully you're starting to get the vibe. You're starting to piece this together. Even if it doesn't all make sense, if parts of it are making sense, that's a good sign. That means it's starting to connect in your brain. And that's really what most of this is. It's not so much technical. Once you get to a certain level with guitar, you find that you can do most of the technical things in terms of fretting notes and all of that. Then it becomes more of a mental thing. It's just understanding, like, what's going on here. So just know that our root fret is the 8th fret. This is our neighborhood we're playing within. We've got our minor pentatonic scale here. We've got our major pentatonic scale here, and we're connecting those two. All right, so let me recap. I'll play through everything that we've learned so far in this part 1 video, and then I'll see you in part 2 video, which you can get over at activemelody.com. Just remember to do a search for EP437. Okay, here we go.